Today's topic is South African Airways. I was going to stray away from South Africa for a little while, but events have put it back on the map. So let's get right into it. Let's talk a little bit about this issue. The reason I mention this is because Deputy President David Mabuza this week said that the ANC government had no plans to privatize SAA. So, South African Airways, an 86-year-old state-owned airline, and it's currently in bankruptcy protection in South Africa. Now, a lot of folks who know me understand that I'm not a big fan of state ownership. I prefer private capital. I don't like the state to be involved in owning corporations or any means of production. That's counter to Adam Smith's style of capitalism, David Ricardo. Nonetheless, that doesn't mean that I'm of the opinion that a state-owned enterprise cannot be effective, even an airline. For instance, two come to mind. The first of which is Emirates, which is state-owned and has been consistently profitable for 29 or 30 years now. The key difference being that with Emirates, the country had a strategic plan and the airline was part of that strategic plan for their future. And it's worked out reasonably well. It's expanded dramatically around the world and has been profitable consistently. Now, a lot of advantages come from state ownership and disadvantages. But another one closer to home for Africans is the example of Ethiopian, which is also a state-owned airline, but an entity that largely operates on its own. The government doesn't intrude and leaves it pretty much to its own devices. As a consequence, Ethiopian Airlines largely operates as a private concern, even though it's state-owned. And contrary to the path that South African Airways has taken since the end of apartheid in 1994, Ethiopian has spread its wings and expanded its network across Africa, into Europe, and to the United States and other locations. So SAA has gone the opposite direction, where Ethiopian has gone, both are state-owned. So while I'm opposed to state ownership, there are two examples, in the interest of full disclosure, of two different companies that have done well in the airline industry, one of them being an African. So let's talk about what's happened here. So what's the issue with state ownership? Well, in the case of South Africa, I would argue that we simply cannot trust the ANC with South African Airlines. Now, some may view that as harsh, but that is the reality. They've not shown the ability to keep their hands out of the company. Chief reasons I have for my concerns with the ANC and South African Airways are patronage, corruption, and a lack of strategic vision. Unlike Ethiopian and Emirates, both of which have strategic visions for expanding their corporations and for increasing their network, remaining profitable, and poaching on other domains where those other companies have not taken advantage of it, like South African Airways. The South African Airlines strategic plan is lacking in many respects, in my view, and you can see that in its execution. And also the fact that the ANC likes to use state-owned enterprises as patronage machines, places where it can park its loyal cadres who are looking for employment. So between patronage, outright corruption, inept leadership, which I had mentioned, and of course the lack of strategic vision, these are the reasons why I think that the ANC can't be trusted with South African Airways. So it's not difficult, but it's challenging to get the facts straight when it comes to how much money the South African government has used to bail out South African Airways over the last 20 years, well, last 12 specifically. Sikonathi Mantshantsha wrote in the Business Maverick, a sister publication of the Daily Maverick in South Africa, in late November. He put out there that looking through the records, looking through the National Treasury reports and also South African Airways annual reports, that up to November of 2019, the South African government had given guarantees and bailouts to the tune of 57 billion rands. That's nearly $4 billion US. Now, since then, the South African government has announced again this month yet another bailout, and the total, when you add the total bailouts together, you get 73 billion rand since 2008. That comes out to 4.87 billion US dollars, nearly $5 billion to save this airline. So what's it work out to per employee? Well, 10,071 employees working for the SA Group, which includes Mango, a low-cost airline, and other entities that are part of the South Africa Group. The total per employee works out to $483,566 per employee in bailouts over the last dozen years. That's a pretty significant amount of money. But even after all these bailouts, the airline remains deeply in debt. So in his article, Mantshantsha said the following about SAA, and I like to quote him, so I'm going to look at this specifically. Machancha said that SA is an overstaffed, inefficient, and ancient dinosaur that, except for a steady stream of taxpayer funds, has been bankrupt for the past 25 years. Ouch. That's a pretty damning statement against South African Airways. He continued saying that the only beneficiaries of this wastage are the trade unions who make money by organizing workers at SAA and their corrupt allies in the ANC and government. Trade unions such as NUMSA, the South African Transport and Allied Workers Union, the National Transport Movement, and the South African Cabin Crew Association are the ones who make money from the people employed at SAA. Ouch. Now, how would they make money? Even without corruption, unions make money off of dues. But, of course, many would imply or state outright that there is corruption in the actual money getting to the unions. I don't have that as a fact, but I do know that they do profit, the unions, by having members who pay dues, which raises funds for the airline. Just a moment. Starbucks, sugar and caffeine, good stuff. So 5,752 people in 2017 were working the airline. Don't have more current figures. That's at the airline itself, SAA. But in the group, it's 10,071, and that's where my figures are based off of. So let's talk a little bit about this. Do a little comparison here, all right, between a state-owned entity and a privately held corporation. And in the interest of full disclosure, I'm a shareholder of JetBlue, and that's why I mentioned JetBlue. So let's take a look at SAA and JetBlue. So we'll look here at the age of the airline, the fleet size, the revenue stream, the most recent profit or loss, the destinations covered by each airline, and the number of employees. So if we look at SAA, SAA is 86 years old this year, and JetBlue is just 20 years, just entering its second decade. And JetBlue had a very bad timing to its start. It started in 2000, just a matter of months before the 9/11 terrorism attacks in the United States, which would have put a lot of businesses out of business. But JetBlue is well run, had a very good strategic plan, and has grown leaps and bounds since then. So if we look at it, South African Airlines, despite being 86 years old, has just 39 aircraft in its fleet. Yet JetBlue has 261 aircraft in just 20 years. Quite a phenomenal difference there. Revenue at SAA most recently was $2.05 billion for the year, and at JetBlue, $7.5 billion in revenue. Now, SAA took a $300 million loss last year, and JetBlue made $118 million. Now, that's not very much. JetBlue the previous year had made nearly $1.5 billion, but 2018 was a difficult year for the airline for a number of reasons. Destination served, and this is a critical one. South African Airways is an international airline. JetBlue is also international now, but only because it flies to the Caribbean, and it's not many destinations. But South African has been around for nearly a century, and it is the national carrier of South Africa, yet it serves just 42 destinations, many of those inside of South Africa, of course. Now, that was before the recent cuts of flights to Durban and a few other locations in South Africa. JetBlue, by comparison, flies to 100 destinations. So with the $7.5 billion in revenue last year, how many employees does JetBlue have? Well, they have over 22,000 employees, and that compares to the 10,071 for the SA group. That's quite a difference. Quite a difference. That is a privately held, publicly traded stock, JetBlue, that has made great progress in just 20 years. Far better than SAA has made in 86. Now that's just for comparison's sake. There are advantages for SAA that they're not exploiting. For instance, JetBlue doesn't have the advantage of being part of Star Alliance. The SAA is part of Star Alliance, which groups with Lufthansa, United, and other major carriers around the world, in which they can pool and share miles and also do cross bookings. So with that alone, you think that would be a great advantage for SAA, and it probably is advantageous, but it is certainly not pulling them out of the red. Additionally, JetBlue flies over 1,000 flights per day. That is a phenomenal number of flights for those 261 aircraft. Think about that, 1,000 flights per day. Quite a few flights. The aggregate profit for JetBlue over the last 12 years was $3.64 billion, while SAA lost a considerable amount of money in that time frame, 14 billion rand, or nearly $1 billion. JetBlue, a small startup, low-cost discount airline, made $3.64 billion, while SAA lost nearly $1 billion, $900 million over the same time frame. Well, where did this all happen? How did it begin? The airline has not been profitable since 2011, and in June 2017, creditors began making credit calls on loans, starting with Standard Chartered, which would no longer extend credit in June of 2017. Now, the government in Pretoria, the ANC, paid 2.2 billion rand to cover those loans so that they could continue operations and get credit from the market. But then Citibank refused to extend credit to the airline in 2017. This is when things really started to get out of control for South African Airways. And by December 5th of 2019, the airline went into receivership or bankruptcy proceedings, and is currently operating under bankruptcy protection. In January of this year, just a couple months ago, a matter of weeks, they also started suspending flights because they had to stop unprofitable routes. And just this past week, a couple days ago, they announced cut rate fare sale as much as 20% on a variety of destinations, including, let's see what the list was, quite a few of their destinations, probably about a third of their routes: New York, London, Washington, Perth, Frankfurt, Blantyre, Dar es Salaam, Kinshasa, Harare, Lilongwe, Lagos. These are all international destinations trying to draw traffic to the airline. Probably a smart move to get the aircraft full. If you're already losing money, that 20% difference is likely to tempt some customers to get on and take advantage of that. So, as I mentioned previously, the cumulative losses for South African Airways since 2007 up to 2017, don't have figures for 18, was 14.64 billion rand, or 800 to 900 million US dollars. Wow, it's quite a bit of money. So some folks think that I'm full of gloom and doom, and that I am only interested in bringing bad news about Africa, and that's not the case. I would say that while I'm opposed to South African Airways being owned by the state, it doesn't look like it's anytime soon is likely that it's going to be spun off as a private enterprise. Let me quote Deputy President David Mabuza, who told Parliament this week, last Tuesday, that the government had no intention of relinquishing ownership of South African Airways during its rescue process, the bankruptcy proceedings, because South Africans love the airline. I'm not so sure that's a very sound business approach, to save something because you love it. But to quote him specifically, as government, we are not looking at privatizing the airline. We still think we can deal with the challenges that are being faced by the airline. Well, I suppose if after 12 years of failure, you're still convinced you can save something, best of luck there, Deputy President Mabuza. A toast to you. I, on the other hand, disagree. I see no indication that the airline has made the right steps for a turnaround, although there have been some recent good steps, cutting unprofitable routes, this fare sale, and some other attempts. But we will see what happens. So, as I said, a lot of folks seem to think that I'm just gloom and doom at times when it comes to Africa. That is not always the case. So how do we fix this? Let's talk about how we fix it. So I'm going to offer a plan on how we fix South African Airways. Now, this is open to debate. You're welcome to question my ideas, but I call it R5 plus P. And let's talk about that. So what are we going to do? The first thing is we're going to do with South African Airways is we're going to restore confidence from the investment community. The actions I've just mentioned that are taking place today, including the fare sale and getting rid of, or at least temporarily getting rid of routes that are unprofitable, that should restore some of the confidence in SAA. That's good news. So restore. Refocus short-term unprofitable routes, which I mentioned are already doing. So restore, refocus, remove. And this would probably be the most challenging and least likely to happen, but I think it's necessary to save the airline. Remove the African National Congress from the equation. Take the ANC out of the path of SAA. Let SAA operate, even if it is state-owned, but in a fashion similar to Ethiopian Airlines, in which the entity, the airline, can operate as an airline itself without intrusion from Pretoria and from the party. This is not a status symbol, although a lot of people in South Africa seem to think that a national airline is a status symbol. That's common across Africa. An airline should be a for-profit going concern, not a national symbol. You have plenty of symbols for that. You have an amazing rugby team in South Africa. You have an amazing constitution. You have an interesting democracy. Those are great symbols for your country. And a wealth of human capital and diversity in your population. Those should be the symbols of South Africa, not an ailing airline. So, remove the ANC from the equation. Rebrand. Rebrand the airline. What am I talking about? Well, South Africa has already rebranded. South African Airways, at the end of apartheid, got rid of the Springbok logo on its tail. It also changed its color scheme from the old traditional Dutch Republic colors of orange and blue and white. And it has come up with the scheme that matches the South African national flag, the current one. And it also put a sun emblem on its its logo. So I would suggest that they rebrand with a new color scheme, new marketing, and look at business alliances. Try to form business agreements with partners beyond Star Alliance, not just in aviation, but outside of aviation. Have alliances with the telecommunication industry for access to Wi-Fi on flights, for instance. And there are other opportunities here to rebrand and market the airline. I'm not saying change the name. I'm saying come up with a different approach. Well, you can't use the Springbok because a lot of people associate that negatively, and that was what it was once upon a time. Bringing the Springbok back to South African Airways would probably raise a lot of contention. You can't use a lion because Kenya Airways is the pride of Africa, so that one's already taken. Perhaps the cheetah. Cheetahs are found in South Africa. It's an amazing creature which is quite agile and fast. Just an idea. So I'm not a marketing person, but I'm telling you that you need to take a look at rebranding. And then resume. Resume the old profitable routes and expand the network. One of the great failures of South African Airways, in my view, is at the end of apartheid, when other companies like ShopRite and banks across South Africa and other businesses like Nando's started reaching beyond South Africa's borders to places in Africa they had not been able to go under apartheid because South Africa could not do business in most of the continent during the apartheid era. Once the veil of apartheid was lifted, the bans ended, South African business could finally expand beyond the borders of South Africa and beyond SADC, more importantly, because it already was in Namibia and Botswana and Zimbabwe, places like that. But beyond Southern Africa, which is where the growth should have been and will be in the future. It's not too late for South African Airways. It should expand beyond the borders into the rest of Africa. Much like Ethiopian, Kenya Airways, Brussels Airlines have all done that. They've all spread across Africa. There is room for growth for South African Airways. So resume those old routes that were profitable, fix them, and then expand your network. And finally, and this is the one that the ANC will not like, and of course you know me, I'm a fan, privatize. Take the company private. What I mean by that specifically is take the company private as a publicly traded company, and what you do is you retain 35% of the shares for the National Sovereign Wealth Fund that the country just announced. So there's a good way to fund it right there. Take the company public, put 35% of the stock in the National Sovereign Wealth Fund so that the people of South Africa, particularly its poor, will benefit from the airline when it's profitable. Not just the elites who are connected and the corrupt, but the people of South Africa, particularly the poor. 35% in the National Sovereign Wealth Fund, 10% into a fund for employees. Employee-owned companies tend to be more efficient, and you find harder working employees because they see the tangible benefits of their contributions to the company. And then finally, sell 55% to the public. So 35, 10, and 55. And that's how I would recommend privatizing South African Airways. So there you have it. South African Airways. Deputy President Mabuza says we're not going to privatize it. I say I double down, privatize South African Airways and get the ANC out of its business so that it can spread its wings and be a profitable enterprise for the benefit of South Africans across the board. This is certainly, I believe, a good idea. And there you have it. There's my R5 plus P plan for saving South African Airlines. I'll run through that again very quickly. Restore confidence from the investment community. Refocus short-term on profitable routes. Remove the ANC from the equation. Rebrand with your color scheme, your marketing, and your business alliances. Resume old profitable routes. Expand your network. And then finally, privatize. And with that, you have my plan for saving South African Airways. This has been a production of the Indaba Africa Group. We hope you liked the video. If you do, please feel free to subscribe to the channel. It is currently free on YouTube. And if you like it, give us a like. If you have some comments, we welcome the comments as well. So with that, I say to you, Sawubona, which is a greeting from Zulu, which means I see you. And hopefully I will see you on our future broadcast.